I've been fascinated with art and music my entire life. In my adult life, I've been blessed to have met so many immensely talented visual and musical artists. Many from here in my own backyard. Kansas City has an abundant wealth of talented creators of original art. Join me, William Saunders, on a journey to illuminate the hidden architecture of creativity, how artists see, feel, imagine, and realize their inner worlds by engaging in open, exploratory dialogue. By bridging the rational and the intuitive, we aim to inspire fellow creators and curious audiences to appreciate the deeper forces behind visual and musical expression.
Inside the Creative Mind with your host, William Saunders.
Hi, and welcome to Inside the Creative Mind with William Saunders. I'm your host, and today I am talking with Brock Alexander, who is a friend, but also one of the musicians who actually held a residency at the former music venue I used to have. And I was delighted, when you guys would have that show, and I thought it was such a unique format. And later on in the show, I'm going to show a couple of clips from that, and we're going to discuss a little bit of that. But Brock, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, William. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing this for me. So, for people who aren't familiar with you, could you please give just the elevator snap pitch for who you are and kind of what you do, man?
Sure. Once again, my name is Brock Alexander. I am a guitar player, singer, songwriter, kind of the front man for the Kansas City-based band, the Old Number Fives. We've been playing around Kansas City and then kind of regionally and sometimes nationally since about 2011, 2012. So much longer than I'd like to admit. And we have 4 original albums, and we perform consistently every week, like I said, regionally or in Kansas City area. So, and we continue to do that, God willing,
I've always felt as a evaluator of talent that it was a huge misjustice to you trying to kind of put you in this box of just being a blues guitarist, because that didn't fit. I mean, it never fit for me, because I was able to see this other side of you as a songwriter. And one of the things that was a real turn on for me in booking the Fives, it wasn't just the fact that you were this really standout guitarist. It was that there's some really good songwriting that's involved too. And so I tend to gravitate to original artists, and I think anybody can stand up and play. If you put in the hours, you can get up and woodshed Stevie Ray Vaughan. But the harder thing to do is write something of your own and make that your own and put that out in the world and stand behind it and watch it grow. So, I want to applaud you for being just a really good songwriter. But I'd like to dive into where did this begin? So one of the questions I like to ask people is, was the music that was in your home as a child, what's your first impressions? Like, I remember, in my parents' home, my dad didn't really, wasn't really into, music, listening to that much, but my mom was, and she was heavily into like George Jones and Charlie Pride. Not that had any, direct influence, probably on my writing styles and stuff like that. But, it was prevalent in the home. So what was the kind of the music that, you can first remember being in your home?
So my mom was a elementary music teacher, and some of my first memories just involving music were getting out of like kindergarten and first grade. And I would basically just walk down to my mom's classroom, which was the music room. And I just remember it was a lot of like, the shelves were full of different instruments and things that you could go just kind of, like beat on a drum or like a Wii-Ro. Like, I didn't know what a Wii-Ro was at the time, but things like that. And also she taught piano lessons. And so I just remember like we would leave school and sometimes take home one of the students who was at, the same school. We would go buy Dairy Queen, and then mom would go home and teach piano lessons until dad got home from work. And then we'd kind of be in the kitchen cooking dinner or whatnot, and still hearing piano all the time. And so I really don't remember a time when there wasn't some sort of music happening. But as far as like what they were listening to, it was a lot of, again, probably just like Beatles and stuff like that. And I remember being a lot younger and thinking that anything that came out, like, I was born in 1985, so anything that was like the mid 90s, I remember being like, oh, this
Mhm.
isn't good at all. Like the Beatles or something like that is what you guys should be listening to. And I was on kind of to a point
Yeah.
of being like snobbish about it. You know what I mean? But I'd say a lot of
Right.
Beatles
Yeah.
and kind of classic rock type stuff. So,
Can you name a favorite Beatles song? I personally cannot. I mean, it'd be hard for me to even get to a favorite album of the Beatles. But is that something that, I mean, can you do that?
I would say anything off the White Album. Honestly, I remember my
Yeah.
sister's a few years older than me, and I remember she kind of caught that bug maybe a few years before I did. And now it's to the point where I can listen to a song or something like that. Just give me a few seconds, and I would probably be able to at least tell you what album it was from or something like that. So I think it's so
Right.
ingrained with just osmosis to a certain extent. And I think it's weird too because as like a music fan, I think when I was younger, I was very much like a John Lennon kind of fan. And then as I got older, I kind of appreciated stuff that Paul was doing because I thought what was John Lennon was actually Paul McCartney, like doing some research.
Right. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
as I've even gotten older, I think I'm probably more of a George Harrison fan than I ever was as a kid. So I think that's cool how it allows you to still find different things and things that you're kind of like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And oh, that was George. That's from his perspective. Um, so yeah, I would say any Beatles song, probably my favorite Beatles song. Or actually, no, I changed my mind. In My Life, that would be it. That would be my favorite Beatles song.
God, that's such a beautiful song. Mine would probably vary by, what year, like,
Yeah.
she said has been at times, I'm only sleeping.
Hmm.
Tomorrow Never Knows is
Yep.
one that I really dig. Speaking of the White Album, Wild Honey Pie.
Hmm.
I like the really kind of crazier things, like, being a William, I have to like, Bungalow Bill,
Yep.
the continued adventures of Bungalow Bill. Yeah. So, did you find that any of that kind of works your way into as an influence? Would you count them as one of your
A hundred
influential
percent.
bands?
100%.
Yeah.
And I think as you kind of like you talking about, like you can learn and woodshed certain things as you're learning any instrument. And I found that as you're learning some of those songs, again, maybe it's just osmosis, or I don't know if you're even aware of it while you're doing it, but it's like, oh, that little key
Right.
change, that's cool. And you kind of put that stuff in your back pocket. And if you're working on something, it's an endless like, spring or whatever well of inspiration to kind of be like, oh, this kind of sounds like that. And I don't want it to sound too much like that, but I can use some
Right.
of that
Yeah.
vibe or whatever. So it allows you to
Yeah.
kind of create your own building blocks, I think.
Cool. Do you recall the first music that you ever um, purchased? The very first thing you owned that you went out and spent your own money on
Yep.
to
I
buy?
don't I don't want to say this in a bad way because I still love the song, but it was Skilo. And the song was I Wish. I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. That's
Yeah.
that's my very, very first
Yeah.
CD, and, I only listened to the first song. I didn't get past song 1, but I remember hearing that and just love the shit out of it.
Brought to you by 913 Sportsography, capturing the spirit of youth sports. Based in the heart of Johnson County, Kansas, we are passionate about preserving the thrilling moments and the cherished memories of young athletes as they pursue their dreams on the field or the court. Check out the links in the comments down below. What a the when I was listening to your tunes and I was just kind of catching up with it, last night, thanks for sending over all the links to everything.
Yeah.
But I was just refamiliarizing myself with the five songs and stuff like that. And I got to thinking to myself, one thing I've never had a conversation with you about was I've been curious about your first band. What was the first band you ever played in? And then what was the name of that first band?
Ooh. Okay, so, when I first started kind of playing in what would be, I guess, quote unquote, a band, I was actually the drummer. I hadn't even really
Hmm.
picked up the guitar yet. and I think I was in maybe 7th grade or something like that. And one of my friends got a guitar and started some guitar lessons, and then we knew somebody else who kind of played guitar, quote unquote. And I was like, well, I'll be the drummer. Let's do it. And I think it was Balaam's Donkey is the name of it, which is, I think, like a biblical reference to, um, that shows you my biblical references, but I believe it was the donkey's name that like told someone in the Bible to do something. And we went with that. I don't think we played any shows, but I do remember it was
sure
like,
that wasn't Shrek?
maybe it might be too. And at this point, like I said, we didn't play any shows, but we had a
Right.
project or something in some class for school. I want to say it was health class, and I don't know why this applies to health class, but we went to my parents' basement, and it was like the 3 or 4 guys that I knew that were kind of playing in the band, quote unquote, and then we had a couple other buddies who had like somebody had a VHS camcorder, and we set up some Christmas lights in the background and recorded us playing. I believe it was "Come Together," like an instrumental version of "Come Together," and then uh, another guy who was kind of playing guitar had kind of learned the riff to um, Ozzy Osbourne. What's the song? It's escaping me.
Oh, Crazy
Yeah,
Train?
Crazy Train. So he kind of learned that
Yeah,
riff,
Crazy.
and we
Yeah.
kind of turned that into our own, bastardized version of Crazy Train. But I remember those 2 things, and we thought we were so cool because it was like, look how awesome we look on camera. And I think shortly after that, I kind of not got tired of the drums, but I wanted to be out front. And I was like, well, these guys can do it. Like, I want to do that too. So I think that's when I slowly started to like pick up a guitar. And I remember my mom had an acoustic guitar in the basement, just in the closet. And I just brought it up to my bedroom and put it by the drum set because I was like, this will look cooler if I have the guitar next to the drums. And then it was like, well, I should probably learn how to do something on it. So, and here we are today.
The other thing, and the question I wrote down last night too, was another question I don't think you and I have ever over beers at the bar or anything. I don't think we've ever hit on this subject either. Because I was thinking that, like, I was asking myself, do I know the answer to this question on your behalf? And I was like, damn, I really don't. Who is your favorite guitarist of all time, and what's their impact on your creative process or your style or anything else like that? Is there any influence that you could say there's a direct correlation between the person you kind of hold up the highest with respect to the instrument and kind of the work you do?
It would be opposite way. That guy right there, Jimi Hendrix. Easiest answer ever. And I know everybody probably has
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in the corner over here. There it is.
Yeah, I got him.
Rock, figure it out.
He's over there.
Yeah, Jimi Hendrix. And I think, again, I was very much like a kind of a Beatles snob when I was much, much younger.
Right.
And when I picked up the guitar, it was very much like Eric Clapton and kind of Cream, maybe some Led Zeppelin. And then in that, like, I was very, I still am, like, very inquisitive. And once I found out like who somebody was that I admired, like I remember going to Best Buy and it was like there's only like 3 or 4 Jimi Hendrix CDs. And I made a
Right.
point to get each one of them, and I had them organized in my room. Um, and then it got to the point where I was taking guitar a little bit more seriously. And I think you can still do it today, where like tablature. I don't really know how to read like guitar music per se. Um, Anything of that level, obviously. And so getting like a tab book, and I remember beating my head against the wall, just like, I can't do this. I can't do this. There's the notes, there's the answers, and I still can't do this. And I think that the coolest thing about being just a fan of music, especially nowadays, is we're kind of getting all these not reissues, but things that are like all of the music. So it's like take 1 through 27, and then the take that we hear on the album is take 28. But I really think it's
Right.
cool to kind of hear the working versions of songs. And every time you hear that, you're obviously comparing and kind of contrasting, but it's really interesting for me to like, oh, this is how it sounds broken down. And in a way, those are really like valuable tools as well, just to kind of like, this is how he's playing that guitar part, or this is kind of the tone that he has. I'm still striving to hear stuff that he does. And it's like, well, throw the books out, throw the guitars out. You know, you're not going to be able to do that. And over time, you get little snippets of it, and you kind of pat yourself on the back, like, hey, I can kind of pull that off. But also, the best part about being a musician is, like we kind of touched on earlier, you know, is being an individual. And I think Jimmy was very much an individual when a lot of people were kind of following fads or doing things. And while he's still a product of his time, you know, like the clothes and kind of the gear that he was just using it in ways that are still, you know, people try to study that and like, I'm not sure why or how he did that, but it's awesome, you know?
Do you have a favorite Hendrix song? For me,
Little Wing.
yeah, it would be hard to beat that one. It's not mine, but
Well, what's
I
yours?
think, and it's only, well, it'd be hard. It's so hard for me to beat this song, and I think it's always been my favorite song from the first time I heard it, and you know, because I'd heard Fire and you know, and all the kind of the hits, you know,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you know, pretty much anything off of Axis Bold as Love,
Yeah.
was a, you know, hit me pretty hard. But however, the song that to me stands head and shoulders in my own psyche is Bono. Sing a song.
Yep. Sing a song.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Oh, that's great.
If 6 was 9 is just like, I don't know, it's just such a really good song. And there's a live version that I had, I found on, there was used to be like a music magazine called CMJ Monthly. It was like a little music rag that also had like you know, one of those like cheap CDs that came into it. Like it was like the CD I'm thinking of had a live version of Message of Love that I'd never heard before.
Yeah.
And that absolutely blew me away. Probably I'm still my favorite solo of his that's a live recording is off of that song. So yeah, just you know, we could spend hours just talking about Jimmy.
We should.
So, and I can't have this conversation with you and not get around to asking this question. So many people, or musicians, I should say, so many musicians tend to not be sports fans, and they're audible about it. You know, I remember catching so much crap when the Royals were, you know, in the World Series, and you know, I had a dilemma on my hands as a businessman do I show the World Series or not? You know, I had musicians that were, you know, adamantly against it, and then I had, you know, the majority of them didn't care, and then I had a few that were, you know, like, oh hell yeah, I kind of, you know, I'll kind of pay attention as I'm playing, you know, no, not the sound. I didn't have the sound on, you know, because I thought that would have been disrespectful, and I was a music venue, so I didn't want to have that, but I also didn't want to lose out on the opportunity of, it's still a neighborhood bar, and still wanted to, you know, celebrate, you know, the accomplishments of the city.
Yeah.
So my question is this: have you always been you know, a sports fan, and how did that kind of work its way into the I guess the holistic body of work that you got? Because you know, it was there for a while, like me, like every time I drive to work in the mornings on 610, or you know, now, you know, 96.5, I would hear you guys all the time, and I'd be like, yeah, that's my friend right there. Yeah. So how did that come about? And then how is there a difference in how you would create for, you know, a very intentional thing as opposed to just writing music? Because to me, they're very different, how you approach those things.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been a big sports fan, and like growing up, I was super active playing sports. And one thing that I would say for me personally was, um, sports allows you to kind of be not a leader or follower. I wouldn't describe it like that, but it gives you an opportunity to like be a part of a team, but also, you know, like every team has a leader to a certain extent, you know, and um, not that I always took those leadership kind of roles, if you will, but when the opportunity presents itself and somebody's got to, you know, take the reins of the game or something like that, you know, those are opportunities. And so, and I think the other thing I took from sports was, when I was in high school, I played basketball, and I have no business being a basketball player, 6 foot, maybe, 5'11". And I think what I remember from that is, and I played all the way through high school. And by the time I was a senior, like, on the starting five and all that stuff. And I think what it taught me was, there was a time actually I had mono. So I got sick when I was a senior. And coming back from that, I would stay after practice and spend, maybe 5, 10 minutes, just kind of shooting like some free throws and stuff like that. And I did it diligently, though. I did it every day after practice. And by the time I played my last game and we lost the last game or whatever it was, I was probably the most confident I would ever be on a basketball court. And so I think it just showed me that hard work and doing it every day and just chopping wood and trying to get better does yield A, just self confidence, but B, you can achieve really, really cool things. And not that you're ever like, I've made it to the top of the mountain in sports or in music. It's like, well, you see what those people that do make it to the top, that they have to do the same amount of work, and put in the time to accomplish those tasks and goals and stuff. So I think from that perspective, it just kind of, music was just an extension of playing sports. And everybody gets into music mostly, I can't say that for everybody, I guess, but most people play music so they can play music with other people. And so then again, at a certain point,
Right.
as I
Yeah.
started to play guitar and wanted to sing and, potentially be a leader of a band, it was just kind of the other thing where it's like, here's an opportunity. And, not every musician has everything always prepared. And I think sometimes the best is like, if you can fake it the best and everybody can fall in line behind you, then you've got your product or your team, if you will. And then
Right
kind of
on.
changing gears, that I think it was right around when the Royals were kind of in that era, 14, 15. And
Yeah.
radio, I would be listening to the games at nighttime on 610. And then the next morning when I'd be driving somewhere, it would still just kind of be on the radio. And as I got to listening, it just kind of became part of the routine for me. And one day I was driving and I heard they were going to interview somebody from the Royals team every Wednesday or something like that. And they were just joking on air, like we should have a band, like the late night show or something and make it like that. And I remember texting in, be like, I got the band for you. Like, we'll do it. Not knowing what I would do, but just, having fun. And they responded.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, cool. And then I got their email and I told the guys, it's like, let's come up with something. And in a weird way, it was just a voice memo that I had an idea and fleeting moment of inspiration. And I kind of sang it into my phone. A couple days later, we, did a little recording just in my basement and sent it to them and they loved it. And that kind of
Yeah.
started the idea behind it. And then they would hit us up about, hey, this is like football season's coming up. Here's some of our like segment ideas. Could you guys write some jingles? And over time, I think it was more of just an exciting, different way to kind of write music because it's very short. You got 30 seconds at most or something like that. And so it's
Right.
how can you
Yeah.
take an idea, kind of fully formulate it, but also leave with the understanding that it's not a long song. It's not supposed to be. It's catch their ear, and then they're going to do their job and do the radio interview. So it's kind of like allowed you to take a step back and not have um, so much mental ownership over it, if that makes sense. I could kind
Right.
of
Yeah.
do it
No, I
and
get
just
it.
be like, here, if you like it, use it. If not, I don't doesn't really affect me that much. And then there's a lot of things too where just getting in that process would allowed you to kind of be creative in other ways. So if there was something I was like, oh, I really like that idea, maybe save that for an album or something as opposed to giving it away for a radio jingle that, I'm thankful that people hear it and, remember that it was us or whatnot. But it's also just it was cool. I mean, and if you play music and write music, that's
Yeah.
just another avenue of it in a weird way. Not that I have a music resume, but add that to your resume of stuff you've done. So
Of course. Yeah. Well, let's take the Matt Cottrell song in particular,
yeah.
because to me, trying to come up with the intro for when he's interviewed on the show, to me is very similar to the stuff that I used to do back in the day for publishing deals. I would get like a list of like there's a there's somebody who's who's a bath soap manufacturer, and they're looking for a version of these boots were made for walking, done in a reggae style. And if it, or I'm just using that as an example,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if it was something that I could do, or if I could lean on Heather Thornton to kind of come in and sing with me on it, we were cranking out these things, but the creative process was wildly different from our normal writing structure. You had a very, they would say, here's the key words you have to, you might have to work into the the 30-second, version of it, maybe one verse, one chorus kind of a thing. And it'd be a cover or it'd have to be something original. And a lot of times we would put this stuff together, and sometimes, we'd make some money and sometimes we wouldn't. But to me, it was a departure from how we normally would write, or I would normally write. And so walk me through how the process of getting the manager for the Royals, how that opener kind of formulated.
Well, I think you got to go back just a little bit. So we actually did a jingle for Mike Matheny, who was the manager before.
Right, yeah.
And
yep.
Best or worst part of this story was I thought it was really cool. And the guys in the band thought it was really cool. And we were like, man, this is awesome. And they're going to play it on the radio, And we tuned in, and the first day they played it, not to throw shade at him, but they played it and he hung up. And I remember being like, what, and I think that signaled the beginning of the end. So I knew it. He wasn't our manager because of that. But anyway.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say he didn't last.
And I think they asked us to do it for Matt Quattrero. And I remember, I think sometimes like music, like it's not necessarily hard for most musicians once you get to a certain level, you can pick up a piano or pick up a guitar or piano or your instrument, and you can kind of hear some chords that maybe go together. Maybe you have a little melody. And then sometimes it's very difficult to move to the next step. Like, okay, how do I put some words to this? How do I finalize it, if you will? But I think sometimes having like a task, like we're talking about, somebody sends you this, they need these kind of words or this context. Much like, honestly, a visual artist. If you go, I remember I was a creative writing major in college, and we would just go to the art museum sometimes, and the teacher would just say, hey, just look around at art and free write, just write. Maybe sometimes the visual aspect allows you to take an idea and run with it. So I think same with the jingles and stuff like that is once you're not confined to like, this is what it needs to be, but given some parameters, sometimes that's helpful because it's like, well, I got to use what I have and the time is very short. This is kind of the instrumentation I want, but then the subject matter and stuff like that just kind of flows based on, your mood or the atmosphere and the stuff you're trying to write. So Mac was honestly, I think they had interviewed him once or twice, and I was like, man, I really need to get downstairs and think up something. And I remember I think at the time I've taught a few guitar lessons in my life, and I had a little exercise for a student. And as I was kind of coming up with the exercise, I was like, oh, it's really easy to do that. And it sounds kind of cool. And for fun, I played some bass and put some drums on it. And then I was like, well, this could be it. And then it basically the same idea. I was like, well, his name's Matt, like talk baseball stuff, like the bullpen and like the lineup and, the road trip and stuff like that. And then I was like, well, I think this is it. And same deal. I kind of emailed it over to the guys, and they were like, we love it. And they've been playing it now for a couple of years. And I feel honored just that anybody would say that about a song I half jokingly wrote, So I think it's interesting how, as a musician, there's a lot of times or songs that I think, man, I wish people would really give this song a chance, or you don't ever want them to like, oh, that's so good. But like, there's songs that I think are really good. And it's the ones that are seemingly like jokes to me that people are like, oh, I love that. And so I think it's just allowing yourself to A, have fun, but B, like once you do something, it's not up to you if it's good or bad. Like your job was to think it's good enough to pass along, and it's their job to kind of make up what they think about it.
Yeah. Once it's born, it kind of lives on its own.
It's not yours anymore. Yeah.
I wish I had some algorithm or something to predict, what people like, because for the life of me, I can tell you personally, I've written things that I was like, oh my God, this is gonna make, I'm gonna sell 1 million copies of this. And you get crickets, and you get this one thing that took you 5 minutes to do, and everybody's like, oh, just I've never understood it. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, I want to dive into this. We're going to play a little bit of Purdy, and then I think after that we're going to get into Heaven to Me. Okay,
sounds good.
This episode brought to you by 913 Sportsography, capturing the spirit of youth sports. Based in the heart of Johnson County, Kansas, we are passionate about preserving the thrilling moments and the cherished memories of young athletes as they pursue their dreams on the field or the court. Check out the links in the comments down below.
Okay, welcome back. We're going to take a listen to a little bit of Brock's song Purdy. And before I play the song, you want to give just a little bit of background on, kind of the song, and kind of when you wrote it, and kind of what was going through your mind at the time.
I think most of the songs that I write that end up actually being released are incredibly old and incredibly older than when they got released. I don't know if that's all musicians, but I think everybody kind of has ideas, and sometimes they get put on the back burner, or you're just not really sure what to do with those ideas. And this is a very good example of that. I kind of had the main little guitar part, and I was originally just playing on an acoustic guitar, and I really enjoyed the kind of chord shapes that I was using. Not to give away all the secrets, but basically when I grew up kind of playing guitar for the first time, Dave Matthews was very popular, and he has a really unique way of playing, just kind of like what we would describe as just like a bar chord. His are just a little bit different voicings. And I think in this song in particular, there was some chord voicings on that acoustic guitar part that I really enjoyed, and the way they kind of sounded together. And then when we went to record it, actually in a completely different vein, one of my favorite things is it wasn't necessarily completed. It was probably 80% done, and there was some sections or even some lyrics that I was like, let's just figure it out. And sometimes not being completed allows you to be creative in ways that you don't think you're going to be. And not saying that it always works that way, but sometimes you get some really cool accidents that only have meaning after the fact, and you could have never placed that meaning there and done it all in one sitting. So having it be unfinished, and yet the deadline, which would be like the recording of it, like, hey, we're recording this now, it's done at this point once we finish the song, kind of forces you to take some chances, or just gobbledygook that ends up being really cool, kind of gobbledygook, if you will.
Well, I can tell you that that I kind of find this song to be a little bit like quintessential, the kind of the sound, like when I think, if I close my eyes and I think of, if I hear you guys in my head, it sounds a lot like this song, without tying it to any one particular song. So here we go. I gotta tell you, I'm so in love with the double track guitars on that. I just think that's so good, and I think another kind of standout thing with that particular song for me is that it's subtle, but I really dig the kind of the B3 sound that's in the background, that's supporting that. And who played that?
I have the best stories about that too. So I couldn't go on without giving credit to everyone else but myself, because basically, like I said, I had kind of the chords for that, and bass player Oli Bowden kind of came up with that intro riff, the dun 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 dun. Anyway, he kind of came up with that, and we were like, okay, cool. And the interesting part about that album for me was everything up to that point. I had done all the guitar parts, and we had done basic takes of songs, and then we would just overdub all the other like stuff. So I would just do rhythm guitar parts, get a live take, and then overdub vocals.
Right.
And so for this Moment to Lose album, I didn't want to necessarily do that. I wanted to try something different, just from my own perspective. I don't know if anybody else agreed with that at the time, but I was like, I want to go in and track live. And so I actually asked Howard Mahan, guitar player, singer, songwriter, and Taylor Smith, guitar player, singer, songwriter. And I love those guys to death. And the best part is kind of like I said earlier, we scheduled the recording time. The song was about 80% done. And our first take of that song was just the trio. And Taylor and Howard were in the control room kind of messing around, and they had no idea what the song was or the chords or any of that stuff. And they kind of, oh, cool. Like, it's almost like Allman Brothers-ish with that harmony there. And we were like, okay, come out here, come out in the room and just try it. And so in a way, more people didn't know that song than knew that song when we recorded it. And so I think that adds to the maybe like spontaneity and it's like, the joy of when you play something for the first time or second time even. There's still that newness feel, if that's the word, newness. Yeah, newness. The new feeling for both of those guys, and then myself kind of included, because it was like, well, now that this is happening, should the solo sections be longer? Should could it be different? And we kind of just finalized it. I think we did like maybe 2 takes with all 5 of us at once. And we kind of just picked the best one. And then I think we redid the vocals. But other than that, that's just a live take where, again, 2 of the 5 people in the room on the song didn't necessarily know what was going to happen. So I think even that little B3 sound is actually a guitar. I think it's just a guitar with a weird kind of.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm not sure. I think that's Taylor Smith. But that whole album, I wanted to try to do something live. And so, again, to give credit to everyone else, a lot of the like lead guitar parts on that album were done by other people in that situation, because I was more trying to focus on just the songs themselves. And so I think maybe even hearkening back to like our discussion of Jimmy, some of my favorite Jimmy stuff isn't the wailing blues guitar soloing stuff. It's kind of the more intricate Castles Made of Sand or like Wind Cries Mary, where he's playing rhythm guitar beautifully, and it's not in your face at all. It's a good song, and just the way he played kind of rhythm guitar. So in a way, like that reminds me of that stuff too, where it's like, Brock, your job is not to shred or impress people with your lead guitar skills, make it a little bit more about the song. So
I'm going to play Heaven to Me. This is just it's just a beautiful tune, dude. Just a beautiful tune.
Ups and downs, smiles and frowns. Today it's windy. Funny, I know you can't see me. Oh, my dreams and what they mean. At the end, God sends. We'll see. Johnny Depp, Les Paul, and me.
That was Heaven to Me by my man Brock there. Yeah, dude, just a completely beautiful song. Can you describe the moment when the idea for this first took shape, and how did it arrive, and how did you nurture it into this full work?
So I think again I was just goofing around, or not goofing around, but sometimes I think you just pick up a guitar and see what happens, or see what comes out of you. And there's a lot of times when nothing comes out, or just you're regurgitating stuff you've already done.
Mhm.
And in this instance, I think it was just that first chord was kind of a cool voicing for me. I was like, oh, interesting. And then
Yeah.
I came up with just the next couple notes. And honestly, it's only like 4 or 5 things happening in that song. And I liked it. And I think I did same deal where most times I'll kind of demo out the idea and, maybe put some drums or something else on it. And I remember I'm not the best drummer anymore because I don't play enough, but I tried to do like a little brushes thing. And I thought that
Oh,
was
I
really
loved it.
cool.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I tried to add the version I actually originally had. It had some weird kind of electric guitar stuff happening where it was like really feedbacky, and then it kind of came into the acoustic part, and then it got feedbacky and stuff again. And I didn't have words for it, but I had the whole song pretty much and the chord changes done. And it sat for probably a couple years, I'm not even gonna lie. Um, and then basically and I'll never forget this song because basically it was in my brain, but again, half complete. Like the lyric content wasn't there at all. And my wife and I were on a vacation in kind of like upstate New York, and we actually went into Canada for a few days. And I'll never forget, basically, I'm a big fan of a Canadian band, the Sheepdogs, and their guitar player lives in Coburg, Ontario, which is just a small little town right off the Lake Ontario. And we were driving from Montreal to Toronto, and Coburg is smack in the middle of that. And so in a weird way, I did what everyone fanboy would do. And I messaged this guy, his name's Jimmy Bowskill, on Instagram. And I was like, hey, man, always been a big fan of yours. I see you have a little recording spot in Coburg. And I was like, I'm going to be traveling through. I'd love the chance to like see your spot or meet you, or maybe do some tracking or something like that, And my wife was like, well, that's never going to happen. And I didn't think it was going to happen either. And then he responded a few days later.
Lo and behold.
And I mean, this is the best. I didn't have a guitar. I didn't have anything. My wife basically, and I was like, yeah, I've got 3 hours. And my wife kind of just dropped me off, and she's like, I don't know what I'm going to go do, but I guess have fun. So bless her for allowing me to do that. And I showed up
Yeah,
with
right on.
1 beer and a joint and like 2 ideas for a couple different songs that would maybe work. And kind of sat there, like met this person for the first time who I'm a very big fan of. He's an incredible guitar player, songwriter. And I love the band. He's no longer in the Sheepdogs. He does his own thing now. But he was basically like a child prodigy. So anyway, we're there, and I played through the song like once just for him and the other guy that was there. And then I was like, I think this is it. Can we maybe do it to a click, like a click track? And I did it. I recorded a little piano part on top of it. And then basically like I had the words, and it's kind of harks back to sometimes not having things finished is better, because I had basically in my brain as this day is approaching, and I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to go meet this guy and maybe, spend my own money to record something. Better be a little bit more prepared with my ideas of what I'm going to do. And so I had maybe 75% of the words ready to go. And like while I'm doing the vocal take, my favorite line in that song is "Today it's windy," which is doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you're there. Sorry.
But it's probably my favorite line because it doesn't apply to anything. And now I'm like, no, that's the whole song, is like the weight of "Today it's windy." And I think I was kind of in the beginning there describing maybe like relationship type stuff, where it's like there's good times, bad times, and like today is windy. It's like, well, what does that mean? Like it could mean any number of things. So I really like that stuff in art too, where it's like leave the interpretation to the audience, not to me. So ambiguous enough to, I guess, get by, but mean something to somebody. And then so kind of did the vocal take, and then I didn't know how the situation was going to work, because some people, everybody does recording or like projects or art in a different way. And I had kind of exhausted what I thought were my ideas for it. I thought it was just going to be like a solo acoustic guitar, maybe a little piano on top. And then I had like some vocal harmonies in my brain. And after I did like those 5 things, like I said, I only had 3 hours with this in this situation. And it's probably just 45 minutes into it. And I was like, well, maybe that's it, guys. And Jimmy, he was like, oh man, I think I have a little vocal harmony in there. And then I was like, cool. And so he actually came into the room, and I went into the control room with his other guy that was there. And he did a few vocal things. And then he was like, I'm hearing strings on it. And I was like, well, yeah. And like I said, he's basically multi-talented. He did a couple violin overdubs, and he had an upright bass that he kind of did an overdub on it. And by that point, it was just fun. And like the idea was kind of there, but then I was like, oh, I found my demo of it on my phone. And I was like, I think there was drums on this at one point. And so we listened to that, and they're like, oh, sure. We'll set up a little drum set in the room there, and we'll add some drums to it. And I think overall it was less than 2 hours, and that's the song, and it was done. And we kind of sat there and listened to it a few times. My wife showed back up to pick me up, and we left, and I was like, what just happened? And it's one of my favorite recordings that I've ever done. And I think not only because of just the moment and the kind of whirlwind and the excitement of it all, but it's also like pretty personal to me, just because like Johnny Depp and Les Paul and myself, we all have the same birthday. So I think that's where that line comes from. And so just me being as honest and revealing as much of myself as possible, but in a way that, like, I don't even know that we've ever played that song live or anything like that. So it was a very beautiful one-day situation, like perfect storm, I guess. And then kind of just moved on with life. But like listening back to it even now, I'm pretty proud of that little tune,
And I mean, you've hit on this, and I find that one of the worst things I can do is try to force something to be finished. If it's gonna mature on its own, it's gonna find its way to its home when it comes home, it's gonna be the right time for it. And sometimes I'm not in a position to write the lyrics for it, and sometimes I'm not ready to quite put a bow on it. But there a lot of people deal with roadblocks and writing stuff like that. And to me, it sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're a lot like I am, which is, I don't feel like I have to finish it. It's going to finish it when it's time. Is that a true statement for you?
Oh, 100%. And I used to maybe,
cool.
And I still do, but like I'll have, a big like piece of poster board around the corner with like all the ideas that I had, just so I can kind of, visually see like, okay, I remember that one, or I remember that little idea, and they're all nonsensical names and stuff like that, but sometimes kind of going through your ideas, you kind of forget you had certain ideas. And sometimes it's really fun, like if you're like, okay, I need to work on some new music or get some stuff done, I always start by kind of revisiting the past things that never got finished, and just seeing if I'm maybe in a different frame of mind, or just as time changes, we all kind of have different personalities and stuff every 7 years, if you will. And so I think sometimes just revisiting certain things, your perspective has changed. And then sometimes, like especially lyric content, I find that unless it comes out initially when I'm kind of coming up with the song, it's almost better to just leave it as an instrumental and allow yourself to kind of feel or experience what that song can be. And it's funny that you mentioned, like, is the song done, or like put a bow on it. I remember asking Jimmy Boskilligan in that studio. I remember being like, is it done? Do we know? I think we were just like drinking a beer, like listening back to it once or twice. And again, it's so short that you listen to it 2 or 3 times, and we were like, is it done? Do we need to do more? And he kind of just looked at me. He's like, no, I think it's done. And I know he said that maybe matter of fact, but it was also very poignant, where it's like, dude, if it feels like it is, then it is. And if you're somehow still searching for something in that, maybe it's not done, and maybe you're not completely finalizing it yet. But it's also, like we said too, at a certain point, what you think is done somebody else might listen to it and be like, wow, really good demo. And you're like, no, it's done. It's finished. So it's not necessarily
Yeah.
up to you to
Right.
make those decisions, you know? So having somebody else say, yeah, it's done. I was
Right.
like, yeah, you're right. It is done. So
Yeah, I've had, with working with the Wall Talkers and with Heather, in the past, sometimes I've felt like I want to continue, knob dicking on something, and they're like,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
it's good. Leave it alone. Just leave it alone. And so sometimes it is hard to kind of do that.
Yeah. And I think too, for me personally, a lot of it comes down to not necessarily like the song itself. Like, is the song done? Like, I'll think to myself, like, yeah, the instrumentation, the song, lyrics, all that stuff, it's done. There's good takes, good performances. I usually get hung up on, is it sonically as good as it could be? And as you do it
Right.
long enough in production aspect of music, that can sometimes be my downfall, is thinking that what I have is good, but I know in the hands of a capable mixing engineer, um, it could potentially be better as far as just sonically and production wise. So I've kind of had to allow myself at times to say, like, if it sounds good, it is good, and it's not up to like how sparkly can we make those symbols. It's like that doesn't matter, is the vibe
Right.
and is the song what it needs to be. Um, and again, like anything else,
Yeah.
sometimes too many parameter, allowing yourself infinite options can kind of be debilitating when it's, you know, just to use that same song as an example. Um, you can go into studios all over the world that have just amazing rooms and amazing gear. And this guy had some amazing gear, but
Yeah.
each one of those things that we overdubbed was with one old RCA ribbon mic, put it in front of the sound source and just that's what it sounds like. So overdoing it can, like I said, sometimes be crippling. And so that was probably uh, an
Right.
enjoyable part of that experience too, was just the fact that it was so seemingly simplistic. There's maybe like 7 tracks on that song when, any other song would have 45 tracks or something stupid. So
Okay. Last question for you is, after work is completed, and in particular, this particular song, um, after it's changed, how does your relationship alter with the song after it's out in the world? Does it change at all, or and the reason I ask this is because I know for myself is once I put it out in the world and it's finished and whatever, I just kind of let it be. I let it do its thing, and I don't go back and try to nitpick it as far as saying, oh God, I wish I hear a cowbell in there, or I hear this other thing with it. That can be done for alternate versions of it in the future, but I just try to let it be. It's like birthing a child, it's just go forth in the world and
yeah,
and live,
yeah.
kind of a thing. So how's that work for you? I mean, does the
Mm,
relationship with the song change over time?
yeah, I think it does, but each song is probably individual basis. Like, I don't have too many songs that
Yeah.
are out there that I'm like, man, I really wish we could have done that one more time or differently.
Mm.
There are things you could nitpick, but more often than not, I tend to allow myself to say, like, wow, that was really cool for what it was at the time. And obviously I've grown and changed, and tastes, in music and things like that change. But um I think most people that I admire as well, if you were to ask them, they would just say, like, that was kind of not marking time or keep, like a place in time, but kind of is, like the recordings that I do now are completely different as far as how I go about them or how I record them than that album that I started with. And at the time, I was doing the best I could. And so I think as a musician and as somebody who I strive, I guess, because I mean, we play, I enjoy playing a lot of covers too. And I think,
Yeah.
again, as you're doing things, you just strive to maybe do the next one differently, or do the next song, with this instrument or without that instrument, or allow yourself to change and grow, and just try to keep one upping yourself as far as the art that you're creating. Like, there's artists that they make huge, 10-foot tall sculptures, and people don't see the 6-inch sculpture that they did, that they're like, this is kind of what I'm thinking. And, they're workshopping all those sculptures until we just see the final product. So I think the joy a lot of the time is the creation and the growth that comes with certain songs. And some songs, like we said, it's, couple instruments and it's done. And then there's other songs where it's like you kind of beat it to death, where you're trying different things. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And then you revert back to what you had before. But each individual kind of demo still has value to a certain extent. And much like some, like the Beatles anthology stuff or new songs that you hear that are take 3, and we hear the final product as take 33. But take 3 can sometimes be really, really cool and just have a different feeling to it, or vibe, if you will.
Right.
And not everybody's going to like each difference. Like some people might really like a song based on like the bass line's really hard and like crunchy. And some people are like, well, I really liked it when it was more of an acoustic singer-songwriter feeling. So, and each one is cool. And then you just kind of have to allow yourself to say like, this is the one I think is best. And that's the one we're going to move forward with, And as time goes on, you might say like, I liked the demo of that better, but that just at the time, that's not what we chose to do. So again, I don't necessarily know that anybody's ever coming out and saying like, I'm glad we did it this way and it was perfect. And if I could go back, I would do it the exact same way. There'd be differences just because we're all different based on the experiences and just life happening, That I love rambling. Thank you so much.
Dude, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Before we go, I'm going to, include some links, for all the old number 5 stuff, links to the music. And I encourage everybody to please get out there, support Brock and the old number 5s, see them live, buy their music, and do what you can to support, artists out there making great art. So is there any projects or anything else you got coming up here in the near future in November, December that you want to let people know about?
I would say yes and no, because there's always things happening. But we actually had a little bit of a lineup change kind of most recently. And so Derek Tucker is back in the band on bass guitar. And so he was in the band for about 6 or 7 years. And then we had a different bass player, Ole Dowden, was in the band for about 6 years.
Yeah.
So we're kind of just feeling out the relationship again. And I think some of the best times about being in a band are when you do get to travel or have to travel. And you got 2.5 hours with a couple people in a van, and that's where you really get to know each other and kind of just seeing what
better
we
like each other.
Yeah. And if you don't, that sucks, but we've all signed up for this somehow. I think the thing is just kind of revisiting what we want to do, because I spent a lot of emphasis in like early on, like wanting to do original music and making that something that would set us apart. And just like anybody else, you have doubts about what that means. And is it as successful as you thought it would be? And success doesn't always mean like monetary success, but so I think currently we're just kind of back into having fun playing live shows. And I know we recorded basically a whole show live at the beginning of this year, and I feel like we should put it out, but I'm also a little apprehensive because that feels like something that's in the past. But what I would say is just somehow stay tuned, and we'll do our best to keep everybody in the loop as far as new stuff. And like I said too, we're always playing. I think that's one thing I would commend the guys in the band, and sometimes to my wife's chagrin, that we're working man's band, like we enjoy playing, and I think some of our best moments aren't captured, on recording and stuff like that. So maybe the morsel would just be that no 2 shows are the same, and we're gonna get up there and play our asses off, but it'll be different than the last time. That's fun too. So
I know that to be a fact, buddy. Brock Alexander, thank you so much.
William, appreciate you, man. Thank you.